Hi everyone, welcome to the Lord of Blights Masterclass Part 3. So in Part 1 we tackled the skin, so we started off with that. And as I mentioned in that part, we're going to be going back to the skin a little bit later once we've painted a little bit more of the model. So now we want to do some of the other areas of the model. So the next logical place to go is the armour. It's another large area. So what we're going to do is we're going to start painting the armour in today. And then we're going to do that in a cool tone of green. So as I mentioned in the preparation and planning video, to contrast with all of the warm skin tones we've got going on, a cool green will work really well with the armour. So we're going to start off with that, and then we'll do some texturing on the armour and some different effects, and we'll put some warm tones in the shading as well, but we'll talk about that as we go through. So the first thing we're going to use is Calabaite green. So this is quite a cool green. So like I mentioned, we'll be using this as a base coat. And so paint the whole of the armour in that to begin with, and we can get started. So on the wet palette, as usual, thinning down with water, Calabaite green, and we're going straight over the armour. Probably should have mentioned that you need to get your armour neatened up with black again, like after the skin stage, so it's looking like this. And then we'll just move in your brush fast, keeping your paint thin. As always with base coats, we're going to do a few coats to get a solid colour. So get a first coat on there. You'll notice it's streaky and you can see the undercoat. That's fine, it's how it should be. Just work that area, let it dry, and then move over it again once it's dry. So don't work it as it's drying, or else you'll get a lumpy, streaky finish. We don't want that. So I'm going to paint all of these armour areas with a couple of coats, like so. Just being careful not to hit any of the skin areas. Moving that brush nice and fast and keeping your paint thin. So I'm going to paint the armour on the legs, and then on his shoulder pad, here and here, and on his helmet. And I'll come back once we've got a couple of coats on that so you guys can see the result. Okay, so that's the Calabaite green base coat down. It took a few coats. It's quite weak in pigment, so it took a few coats going over just to get it strong, but it's worth it. So just keep it smooth, keep going over, and then you'll end up with something like that. I also did the fan brace armour there on the hand, so that's the same colour. So what we're going to do now is we're going to heavily thin down some Ink by Darkness on the wet palette and make it into a wash. So we've got this kind of consistency there, and all we're going to do is we're going to wash this over the whole of the armour. Don't worry about it being too neat here and there. We're just going to let it run into the recesses and run down as well. So we're going to give this armour a bit of texture, and not only will the green contrast with the skin, but the texture will also contrast with the skin, because the skin is quite smooth finish. So we're going to go for a bit of texture on this armour, like it's been battered and pitted slightly. So we'll do that as we go through the stages. As you can see, it's got these holes in it, so we'll accentuate those with some texture painted on. Really just want this Ink by Darkness to run into everything. So this arm is going to have a different finish. Let it run in. Just be confident with it. So I'll do this over all of the armour, and then come back and show you what it's like once it's dry. Okay, so that Ink by Darkness wash is dry now. You can see it's just shaded some parts of the armour for us, and just changed the tone of it slightly. Just knock back that flat Calabaite green. So we're going to start working some texture now. So rather than blending up smoothly the armour like we did with the skin, we're going to be doing a sort of mottled effect on it, which is, like I say, we've got these pitted holes in the armour, so it doesn't make sense to have it completely smooth, so we're going to just make the armour have a slightly different feel to it. So I've done this a few times before on some other stuff, so we'll do it on here as well. So if I just show you on this leg. So with your thinned down Ink by Darkness again, so thin to that wash consistency that we've got. So just load up your brush and basically concentrating on the recesses, but doing it over all of the armour. Just randomly blob on Ink by Darkness onto the armour like this. Now I've not lost my mind. This is actually the technique that we're doing. So once that's dry, you'll see. So do it over the armour, but make sure you focus a little bit more onto any recessed contours. So keep your paint thin, lob it over. So towards the bottom of the knee pad, we want to have more of it. Make sure that it's heavier down there. Do that over all of the armour. So once again, just making sure that where we're going to have more shadow, there's more of that thin Ink by Darkness. And here, make it quite random. It doesn't have to be super neat. Even do it on the feet as well. Let's plop it on. You can see how I'm moving my brush now. Do it over everything. And you want it to leave these tide marks that you see. That as it's drying, you'll get those. So don't worry, we want those. I'll do the same with this leg, but so the shoulder pad will just get the same treatment. So smaller blobs at the top here, smaller amounts, heavier blobs and bigger ones down here, because that's where we're going to have more shading and more shadow. Okay, that's the same with the helmet. So we still want some at the top, so smaller, lighter ones, nice and random, heavier, bigger ones down here. So I'll finish this off and show you how it should look once it's done. Okay, so once your Ink by Darkness blobby stage is done, it should look something like this. So slightly blotchy with tide marks and a bit of a mess, quite frankly, but this is how it's supposed to look. And obviously you did focus more towards the bottom of the armor plates, so it'll give it a little bit of shading as we go through. So now that that's dry, just again with the Ink by Darkness, I think it's worth just doing the same thing, but only concentrating those blobs in the areas where we want the shading. So just going back in once more, so just at the bottom, just over those other ones that you've added, only at the bottom of the armor plates, bobbing it on. Load your brush up when you run out. Same under here. In any shaded areas there. Once it's dry, it'll dry darker. So down here again. This stage is quite fun. I enjoy this sort of stage. You don't have to be so neat. Just do that over everywhere. And we want more shading. We'll come back in a minute. Okay, so that's all dry now. So we'll carry on with the next stage. And that is just heavily thin down some black to the same consistency as that Ink by Darkness. So this is thin down black paint. And we're going to do the same thing, but we're only going to focus on the lower up parts of the armor and inside the recesses and gaps in the armor now. So keep your paint thin. We'll run it in down these panels as well whilst we're doing this. You'll notice I don't need to be too neat here. It seems harsh to begin with, but as it dries, it'll won't be so bad. Just be confident with it. Shade those panels as well, so whilst you're doing this stage. inside here. Trying to get some contrast on the armour now. Running those panel lines. Just a bit at the bottom of the foot. Underneath the knee pad. So if it seems quite harsh, don't worry about it. We're going to be going back in a bit to put it together and tidy up. So I'm going to do this and come back and show you how it should look. Okay, so that black stage is done now. So at this point, you're probably wondering what I'm doing. So we're going to keep going. Don't worry if it looks a bit messy. This is how it's supposed to look right now. We're going to keep going, so have faith. So now we're going to thin down some calabaite green to that wash consistency again. So like this. And then we're going to do the same thing with the Armour. But we're going to leave the black. So I'll just show you on this bit. So we're going to do the blob thing. The blob thing, that's the new name for it. So mottling. Focusing on the areas where we would want highlights. So we're not smoothly highlighting this area like you might do. And then just gradually, where the black ends, just go over some of that a little bit and it'll pull that in to that area so it won't look so harsh. So the same up here, look, we want the highlights at the top, blobbing those highlights on. Going down a little bit into the area where we've done, but not entirely. We'll do a bit at the bottom here as well because we'd probably highlight down here. So just blobbing on the highlights. Behind the foot, there. Getting that mottled effect going on. And I'm going to do that over all of the armour. So in the areas where we want highlights, but leaving our dark mottled effect. And then on the knee pad as well. You get the idea now. So concentrating at the top of the knee pad where we would normally highlight. Down here. And then just a little bit down the bottom here. Just so that black doesn't seem so strong. So I'm going to go over the armour with this now and show you how it should look. Okay, so just finishing off the calabaite green stippling now. So on the head there, as you get into these more detailed areas, just use a smaller amount. Plopping it on. Let that dry, go over it again. Let it dry, go over it again as much as you think is necessary. So this is the sort of thing we should be looking at now. See that there? And then around the back as well. So it's still quite messy, but we're just working up, get some contrast on the armour now. So we've been using cool coloured greens, so greens with blues in. Now if we keep highlighting with those cool greens, the armour's going to really feel like a separate piece to the rest of the model. And we want it to sort of sit with the rest of the model and be in harmony. So we're going to mix in some warmer greens now to highlight with. So I'm going to mix in some Strachan green. So Strachan green's it's got a little bit of yellow in it, so it'll add some warmth to the armour and the highlights. So if we mix calabaite green and Strachan green on your palette, so about 50-50, and thin that down again to wash consistency. So we've got that there. And we're going to do the stippling thing again, but doing more within the areas where you'd want highlights, keeping your paint very thin, leaving some of the previous ones showing. So just that amount. So in the areas where you would normally highlight up, just doing this thinned stippling technique that we're doing. Do that over all of the armour. So if you keep it thin, you can let that dry and then go over it again as you need to. Do it on the foot as well. So this warm tone that we've added into the highlights, that will help the armour feel part of the model. And then as we highlight, our stippling is going to be getting smaller. So rather than big blobs like we began with, we're getting a bit more concentrated and a little bit more accurate with where we're placing them. So this side's dry. So I'm just going to go over it again now it's dry to make that highlight, textured highlight, a little bit stronger. And as much as I want to keep going. So I'm going to go over the armour here with this thin stippling, getting some highlights on, and I'll show you guys how it should look when we're done. So just finishing off this stippling mix stage. So I just wanted to re-emphasize that you stipple, let it dry, go over it again, and then as you get towards the top of the areas where you would have more highlights, make the stippling smaller and more focused, like so. So we get a little bit of contrast going on now. You can see it's darker down here, lighter at the top. Same with the helmet. So stippling at the top here, keeping it light. Delicate touch now. Go around the eye. Just keep that going on that. You can see how the arm's starting to have a texture to it now. Same with these areas. Stipple, let it dry, go back over again with smaller stippling on the raised areas and on the bottom bits as well where you would have those highlights. It takes a bit of time, but it's nice, it's worth it. There we go. So I just wanted to show you guys that again. So okay, we'll go on to the next stage in a second. Okay, so now moving on, I'm going to thin down the Strachen green to that same consistency we've been using on the palette. So it's a wash consistency, very thin. And then I'm going to be doing the stippling even more focused on those raised areas now, and even smaller. So don't worry about highlighting anything just yet, we're just getting the contrast on the armour. So like I said, this could have been blended, but this stippling thing is going to give it a nice different finish to the armour, making it feel like a different surface to the skin. So I'll do in here as well, a little bit further up here. Don't go down too far. And this is a warmer green now, so it's warming up that armour for us a little bit. Leaving our previous stippling layer showing in some areas so we don't cover up our hard work. And once it's dry, if you want to, you can go back over it again to make those highlights a bit stronger towards the top. So I'm going to do this over the armour and show you how it looks. Once again, this is pure Strachen green now, thinned down. There we go. So I'll carry on, we'll come back in a minute. Okay, so the Strachen green stipple stage is done now, so you can see how we've got stippled highlights going on. We're still not finished, so before we actually put some edge highlights on the armour or anything like that, we're going to put a lot of warmth into the armour because it's still it's lacking contrast and it needs some warmth in the shading, and we need to get that out of the way now. So we're going to thin down some Rhinox hide, so wash consistency. So this is a warm dark brown. So what we're going to do is we're going to put warm browns into the recesses and into the shaded areas. And that's going to contrast quite a lot. And what it'll do is that warm colour in the armour will pull in the warm colour from the skin and really help the figure sort of sit together quite nicely. So if I show you, we're just going to glaze it in to those recesses. So keep it thin. This is the first part we're going to do. Washing it in to all of the recesses in the armour. Under here. Also, we're going to put it in to these pitted areas which you got on the armour. So just drop that in there. Let it sit within those areas. And allow it to dry. So I'm going to go around these areas first and show you how it should look. Okay, so I've run that Rhinox hide into all the panel lines now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shade down really thinly with some glaze consistency. Same thing, just into some of those darker areas on the armour. So not just the panel lines, but down here. Just get some warmth in around the rivets. And then down in here as well, where we place the black. Just a little bit. Do a bit on the front down here. There's like a thin glaze of brown. Just giving it a little bit of warmth. Don't need a lot. The bottom of the knee pads. Bottom of the helmet as well. Just working on down towards those rivets. Once it's dry, you can go over it again if you need to. So just keep going round and just glaze a little bit of that Rhinox hide into those darker areas. Okay, now we're using Doomball Brown to do pretty much the same thing, but we're going to leave a little bit of the Rhinox hide showing where we want to, but the Rhinox hide really is just allowing us to make this intense warm brown sit in the recesses in contrast with the green. And like I said, it's going to really pull in all those warm colours from the skin as well, so the model doesn't seem jarring and separate. So dropping it into those pitted holes again, all around the recesses, allowing it to run into the recesses there, you can see. So keeping the Doomball thin. And then just running in there where it needs to be. It'll give it that dirty, grimy feeling as well, which we want with a Nurgle. So putting the Rhinox hide there is acting as a bit of an undercoat for this colour as well, so that's helping. You can see there now what we're going to do. So I'm going to go around and do that. Show you how that looks on the model. Okay, so the Doomball Brown stage is dry now, so you can sort of see it's really picking out those recesses and the gaps between the armour plates there, and all those pitted details that are on the armour. I've also washed that around the icon on the shoulder pad, hopefully you can see, and around the spike on the shoulder pad as well, all of those areas. So we're going to continue with this. I should show you as well. I've done it around the icon on his Vambrace armour on there as well. So I'm thinning down some Scrag Brown now on the palette, making that into a wash consistency again. And we're going to continue with the same thing. We want just some real contrast in those armour plates. So just thinning that down. It would help if I was actually in shot. Putting that down and putting that in there again. Being a bit more sparing with it as we're getting stronger in colour. Running into the recesses on the armour plates. So it's giving us that contrast that we want. And into those pitted areas as well. Just drop it in. And in the gaps. So I'm just going to go around and do that. Make that stronger now. And you can see that those warm tones are really making the skin and the armour feel as one on the model, and it's not feeling too separate. So I'll go around now and I'll show you how that looks. Okay guys, this is how we should be looking now. So the scrag brown is dry. You can see that it's just really warmed up that armour a lot now. And you can hopefully see the armour sort of sitting better with the skin. So last bit on this one, I'm just going to take some Deathclaw brown. If you don't have any of that, just mix a little bit of Shabty bone or something in with your scrag brown. Should be similar. So we're just going to take, so this is a very orangey brown, just thinning that down again. And on those larger pitted areas, I'm just going to allow that just to sit in the middle. Just the larger ones. Just dropping that in. So that one's got a bit too much in there. So just take the paint off your brush and then just draw it out with your bristles there. So I'm just going to go around these. To help them really pop out, it will, when they dry. Probably just put a little bit in a few of these areas. Just at the top. So I'll finish this stage of the armour now and then show you how we're looking. Okay, so that's our warm shading done now. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to go around with Strachan green and actually do an edge highlight on everything like we would normally do. So picking out all the edges, so using the edge of your brush when you need to. Down these side bits. Obviously thin Strachan green down a little bit with water on your palette. So we're just picking out the edges, describing the armour plates now. So go around the whole model like this. So you can't use the edge of your brush for these areas, so you have to use the end, the point of your brush. So just being very careful. Like so. So yeah, I'm going to do this and show you what it should look like after this stage. So there we go, so that's the edge highlight done now, Strachan green on the armour plates. You can see if I just turn it, we've added that and it's given us a nice amount of definition on the armour. So it worked quite well now, I think. And I also did it on the armour here, on the van brace. So before we go on to the next stage, I think some of this stippling sort of looks quite harsh here and there, so I'm just going to thin down some of that Strachan green into like a wash consistency on the palette. So it's very thin, maybe even thinner than the wash consistency, and I'm just going to glaze it gently over some of those highlighted areas just to knock back the harshness of some of that stippling. So just here and there. You can do this if yours needs it. If you don't feel it does, then it's okay. I'm just glazing it into the highlighted areas just a little bit, just to smooth out some of that stippling. Doesn't need a lot. You don't need a lot on your brush really either. So it's a small amount, but I think it'll make the difference. especially on these rounded areas on the backs of the legs. So this is quite harsh there. So if I just glaze a little bit over, pulling the brush in towards the centre, we'll just soften those highlights, that stippling a little bit. So just go around your model and do that as much as you need to. There we go. And we'll go on to the next stage in a second. Okay, so on to the next stage now. So we're going to add even more contrast on the armour now with Krieg khaki. I don't even know if I've used this colour before, but it's quite a nice warm pale green. It's a natural colour, so we'll add that on to the higher points of our highlights. So it's a small amount. Just on the very edges. So not covering up all of the highlights that we've just done. So just at the top here. Here, leaving out other highlights that we did earlier just down the bottom. Might want to hit this corner just to pick it out. It's always nice to pick out the corners. So just having another highlight over that green armour, but a little bit more extreme. So I'll go around this now, just picking out those places. And as I've done before, I'll take some reference photographs and put them on my Instagram account for you guys so you can study those if you're following along. Show your progress as well. So this is just such highlighting with this colour, so we're not stippling with this colour now. So just picking out those very edges. So I'll do this and come back in a minute. Okay, so just finishing off that sharp edge highlight now. What I'm going to do is I'll just show you actually where I've hit just those edges, those top corners. I've thought that if we just thin some of that Krieg khaki down quite a bit, and then we just on these back of the legs here, just do with a little bit more highlights, feels a bit flat. So just using that really thin stippling there, right in the centre. And the top of the shoulder pad needed it as well. I've already done that up there. Just felt a little flat. Just back of the legs. Just on those rounded parts. Also his face. We want to keep the attention on the face as well, so I did the same just around the helmet. So just really thinly, just around there, just around the eye. Just a little bit more contrast on it, so you can see that now. Okay, so I think we'll leave the armour for a little while now. Just as we did with the skin, we might come back later on and maybe add an extra highlight here or there, or just tweak the armour a little bit, but I think for now want to move on so you can see how it is. As we've done with other tutorials, you'll notice that when we use a few different paints, it gives us a couple of different finishes. So like the glossy area might be from the black, or some of the other paint might be matte. So what we like to do then is just get some Lamian medium, or like a varnish of like a matte varnish, or I like using Lamian medium, and we just paint it over the whole area, and it'll give us the same finish over that armour, and it should pull all those colours together nicely for us as well. So I'm just going to paint this over all of the armour now. Just keep it thin, keep your brush moving. One coat should be enough, just let it dry. What I'll do is I'll do this, and I'll take a photograph, and I'll do a recap, and then we'll finish. So catch you in a second. Okay guys, there's a picture of the armour now. You can see in the photograph there, you can see all the different tones that we added into the recesses. and into the pitted areas as well. And then all those mottled highlights and all the stippling works really well to give the armour some texture, so it makes it very different to the skin. Like I say, we'll probably go back a bit later and we'll do a bit more work on the armour as we balance out some other colours across the model. So sometimes it's nice to not finish the area completely like we did with the skin. We'll go back later and we'll do a little bit more work on it as well. So we'll move on to some other areas next. And there's the back of the model as well. I always put these pictures on my Instagram with extra ones if you guys need reference, which hopefully you're following along. And then share your work, hashtag Lord of Blights Masterclass on Instagram and Twitter as well. And I'll see you in the next one real soon, guys. Cheers, bye.